When one talks about discussing sex, talking about sex, educating children about sex, it becomes a very vexing issue to many. Because some people believe that just simply mentioning the word sex is taboo, and children should not hear that word sex until they're teenagers, which of course is the wrong approach. It needs to be discussed. But how early exactly is the key question? That is something we'd like to look at today. Because Save the Children, a charity that says children up to the age of 18 are victims of crime and are exposed to sexual abuse, as we've pointed out, in an early age. They've said that maybe as young as 5 is when you should start explaining sex and sexual contact with children. I don't know whether or not you agree with that. That's what the newspapers have reported. But let's look at some of the stats. In 2010, 2011, there were 66,198 sexual offence cases reported in South Africa. Of this, the Western Cape had 9,299 cases reported. This is the fourth highest after Gauteng, KZN, and the Eastern Cape. In the same period, there were 28,128 sexual offences reported involving children under the age of 18 in South Africa. Now, that's by far the biggest crime against children in our country. Common assault next, with 13,387 reported cases. It's also the only crime against children that has continued to increase since 2006. So what do we do about it? Now, I've got Madhuri Das, who's the popular mobilisation advisor for Save the Children. I'm sure we'll get into your title a bit later. But good having you on the show this morning.
Thank you so much.
Now, please talk to me about this suggestion in the newspapers that Save the Children is saying, speak to children as young as 5. Is that indeed what you are saying?
That is correct. Children as young as 5 can have questions about sex. They can ask you, like, where do babies come from, for instance. And what we're saying is that, answer that question as directly as possible, and obviously in a way that a 5-year-old will understand. And the reason we are saying this is because if a child doesn't get the answers that they want from you, they're going to continue to be curious. And as a parent or as a teacher or as a caregiver for a child, if he's not going to be able to ask that question in a safe environment, he's likely to go to someone else for information. And who knows what that might lead to, either misinformation or even an unsafe sexual encounter.
Now, we know that a lot of those sexual encounters take place in the household. So whose responsibility is it then at the age of 5 if that child experiences this sort of negative sexual experience and disgusting sexual experience at such a young age? Should we look at nursery schools and schools when they're older than 6?
Well, no child should have to experience that at all.
Yeah.
And what we are saying is that if we educate ourselves properly as parents and as caregivers or even religious leaders or whoever else a child might come into contact with, then we will be in a position to answer the questions accurately, make sure we're not judging the child, and make sure that they have a safe and positive environment in which to ask the question and to get the information that they need. Now remember that Save the Children is actually conducting a project that's going to run in 12 different countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. And the reason we're doing this is because, these are the countries that bear a disproportionate share of the global HIV burden. And sex does remain the dominant mode of transmission. So while there's a backdrop of HIV and the fact that we'd like to prevent that, there are also cases of unwanted sexual contact. So, both these reasons combined give us really the reasoning behind why we would want to create a positive sense of self and identity amongst children, make sure they understand things like power and gender dynamics, which often underlie many sexual contact and relationships. What's the difference between good information, bad information? Making sure they know they're in an environment that they can ask questions and that they can make personal choices to stay safe.
I mean, that sounds very academic to me. I mean, how does one then get down to the very basics as a parent when discussing sex with a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old? What do I concentrate on as a father, let's say, of a 7-year-old?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're using UNESCO guidelines to sort of do this. I can't spell out all the guidelines, but I can give you a few examples.
Sure.
So if you're talking about sex to a much younger child, say starting at about 5 years, you can simply explain that sex is how adults show care and affection. And this automatically puts many things into play. So, for instance, if you're not an adult, then it shouldn't be happening to you. And if it's not about care and affection, then it's wrong.
Yeah.
So, it's put it's in simple language that a child can understand. But if you're talking to a teen, obviously,
different, yeah.
you can go into more details. For instance, you can describe what an adult sexual response is, what common sexual behaviors are. Even you can talk about elements of sexual pleasure and also about responsibility.
Now, I mean, I've spoken to, when my little ones were 7, I spoke about sex, and I explained what it is, and I also spoke about the consequences. I also said that no one is allowed to touch you anywhere close to there, and I explained why not. And surely one needs to get, I wouldn't use the term explicit, but surely you need to get down as basic and as real as possible when you talk about these things so that they understand it.
You do. And you do explain, for instance, what is good touch, what is bad touch. Girls who are a little bit older can be counseled to wait until they understand. I mean, the age of sexual debut in this country is about 13 years, which is quite low. You can get the right messages out. But the important thing, again, I keep stressing this, is to make sure that within the family you have an open environment. You don't foist your own perceptions on the child. You don't judge them for asking a question. Make sure you're open, you're available to your child, and you answer the questions as directly and as accurately as you can.
Is South Africa doing enough as a country to combat sexual crimes against children specifically?
I'm sorry, I don't think I'm authorized to sort of answer that question.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I won't be able to give you an answer that's accurate. But I do know that no child should have to go through this at all. And if there's any trouble whatsoever on this front, please seek help.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Madhuri Das, who's the Popular Mobilisation Advisor for Save the Children.